Have you ever wondered why Lord of the Rings Online is still around in 2024? I mean, the game has been around for nearly as long as World of Warcraft, although probably not as popular. It has still retained a dedicated and steady player base, even through a number of expansions and a lot of changes throughout the game. To unravel this mystery, I went ahead back into the realm of Middle-earth to try out the legendary servers of Lord of the Rings Online, and let me just say, it is incredible, and it is not an MMO that I would ever recommend you missing out on. You can't ignore this. So if we go ahead and look back at MMOs as a genre, it is a, unfortunately, shrinking niche. Other genres such as like FPSs, first-person shooters, boast hundreds of thousands of players daily across a number of different games, whereas MMOs have become their own isolated little bubble, we'll say. Still, the genre is around and is still somewhat flourishing. If you look at games such as World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, who have both released major expansions this year, heck, I'd even roll in Guild Wars 2 for that matter. There's still interest and intrigue within this genre. With notable games like WoW and Final Fantasy, how has Lord of the Rings Online stayed afloat for as long as it have in a shrinking niche? To put it simply, they've stuck with their game, and they've remained dedicated to the players that they have, and they have honestly stuck true to the vision of J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of the Lord of the Rings series. Now, that isn't 100% the reason why. There are a number of factors that I will cover, but I also want to talk about some of the misconceptions that I've heard about this game. So first off, right out the gate, you do not need to be a hardcore fan to enjoy Lord of the Rings Online. I certainly am not.
Wait a minute!
I have not been that type of person or that player who has read all the books and understand all the lore and the history of the game. I didn't find out who Tom Bombadil was until I actually started playing the game. By the way, he's basically God. No, Lord of the Rings Online does not require you to have a PhD in Tolkien's universe to understand what's going on and how to play it. Another misconception that I have seen for quite a while, and this goes across a bunch of MMOs, is the dead game, dead MMO kind of thought process, which I feel like is always just such a short-ranged, a short-sighted, just knee-jerk reaction to if the game isn't as popular as your, big markers, which you always view, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, those two, like anything outside of their popularity is considered a dead game. When we look at it, there has been and still is a dedicated player base who logs in every day, who enjoys the universe, who enjoys the scenery, the gameplay, just it being involved in the Lord of the Rings universe. And I feel like that's something that needs to be understood. Now, a lot of what MMOs are, of course, is that interaction with other players. And in my experience in the regular servers as well as the legendary servers, there are tons and tons of players that I am running into and having interactions with and having a great time with. Now, I feel like that idea of a dead game is because it didn't reach X amount of popularity or X amount of vision, we'll say. But my main point about the dead game idea is that it's just false. The game is still being developed, it's still being worked on, and there are still players who very much enjoy it. One of the funnier interactions that I've seen, actually, even with my videos that I've posted, is that, oh, the graphics stink, but it's by like someone who has a Minecraft profile picture. I'm just saying. The graphics haven't really received too many updates. There have been improvements as the game has gone on, and I will admit that it's not, this beautiful picturesque scenery that you would expect for more name brand titles. Like I've been playing Final Fantasy 16 on the side, and it's nothing like that. Absolutely not. However, it isn't terrible to look at. And I feel like people use that as just an excuse to just write it off. Oh, I'm not going to like the way that it looks. Does graphics equal good gameplay? Now, if I am to be honest, then I do have to point out the fact that other MMOs, as I've mentioned, Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, are putting out expansions that are offering brand new content. There are updated graphics. There are a lot of other features that are being implemented into these games, which make them a lot more popular. They're a lot more revenue driven, and there's a lot more going on. So really, in that regard, Lord of the Rings Online has had a challenge to attract new players to their game, and then, of course, keep them entertained with their gameplay and their content. And that is true. Still, is hard work and being dedicated to the lore really all that it takes to be a successful long-term MMO? Well, they are doing something pretty special. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Lord of the Rings Online has released their new legendary servers. Now, the legendary servers think of very much in the same way as World of Warcraft Classic, where essentially it is reverted back to the original gameplay, the original, we'll say, storyline of the game, and then rebuilds it season after season after that. So for reference, the max level in Lord of the Rings Online on a regular server is level 150. Here on the legendary servers, you can only get to level 50 max. They have transferred over their landscape difficulty, which is absolutely one of my favorite features in this game, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But not only that, they have included the new Veil of the Nine feature within the server. So the Veil of the Nine is essentially, as you were killing all these different mobs and going through the quests out in the open world, there is a chance that you will spawn a Wraith. Now, a Wraith will have higher damage, higher health, and all that. It would be a challenge to take down. And of course, you get a couple of buddies go and take him down. It's no problem. It's easy. Now, there is also a chance that you will spawn one of the 9 ring wraiths. And one of these 9 ring wraiths take nearly the whole, entire zone to take this mob down because they just hit so hard and they provide such a challenge. Now, what do you get for this existential hassle? Oh, you just fought to the death fighting off 3 mobs and then in-spawns this uber tanky mob. Well, what am I going to do with that? Well, if you defeat these mobs, you get Tattered Claws, which can then be exchanged for minions, for titles, for portrait pictures, a bunch of cosmetics that don't necessarily vastly improve your gameplay and make it seem as if, you just need to farm that and then that's going to get you the best gear. It will give you that kind of yeah, I've taken that challenge. I've beaten that challenge. Look at me go. Which I think is really, really cool because then for those who prefer not to be involved in the Veil of the Nine event, they don't have to worry about it. So along with this legendary server, they have taken all of the empirical information that they've gathered over their 17 years of being in experience and then have implemented those new features into those legendary servers. So we're talking the DLC classes, the DLC races, any of the other features, if you had already owned them, they are then transferred over to the core game that you were playing through on the legendary server. And then on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, the landscape difficulty, which is it is the personal challenge that I love. So landscape difficulty essentially ups the ante across the board for everything that you have to deal with in the open world. So quests become harder, mobs become more difficult to challenge, and it essentially allows you to go through and have to micromanage everything that you were doing. Every encounter has the chance of going sideways and killing you. That to me really provides that extra level of oomph as far as experience goes. When I initially played and I didn't have the landscape difficulty on, I was, it was easy. Everything died and melted in my face. With the landscape difficulty, I pumped it up to level 3, and now I can only take on 2 or 3 mobs on my own carefully without overpulling. If I overpull, then I'm instantly dead. There's no running away. That's what's really fun about it. And that's something that I've very much enjoyed in my time playing Lord of the Rings Online. And that's going to be featured on the Legendary server. I will say that the Legendary server does have an external cost. While the base game of Lord of the Rings Online is free to play, to access the Legendary servers, it does run a cost of about $15 a month. And of course, if you buy multiple months, it has a heavily discounted price. However, playing on the free trial to see if you would even like the game as it is and enjoy the features that they have, that's one of the best parts of this game. I prefer the Legendary server just because there's reduced lag. There's a lot of players who are going through that initial experience of Lord of the Rings Online who weren't there when it was initially released. That to me is fun. However, you still can play it for free. Aside from all that, one thing that Lord of the Rings Online has done that is absolutely just my favorite feature of this entire game, of this entire series that I have done, has been that it really captures that classic MMORPG experience that, every item matters. Every unique thing that you fight and find is a huge deal. Doing your quests and doing your duty may be simplified, but it's almost like this really comfortable, quiet MMO experience that is just relaxing in my mind. Now, again, I do also play Final Fantasy XIV. On occasion now, I still play Guild Wars 2. And those are great as well. They're fast, they're fun, there's usually a lot more people going into it. However, Lord of the Rings Online really captures the essence of what the classic MMO experience was. Many other players who are like me are up there a little bit into age, and we got to experience the initial we'll say like the original MMO experience. So classic WoW, RuneScape, heck, I even say Guild Wars 1. We got to experience those. And as I've played through Lord of the Rings Online, that is what it reminds me of. It reminds me of that just, hey, this is where you are. This is your journey. Just go do your thing. Figure it out as you go. And it's like, that to me is like a delightful package that I am unwrapping layer after layer. And it's something that I would stress to you that it might be worth your time to take a look at if you're really craving that good MMO experience. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but really, what does Lord of the Rings Online have that other MMOs do not have? Out of everything that Lord of the Rings Online does, its best feature and its best experience, at least in my mind, is that it feels like home. When I used to play video games, I used to play video games just to simply relax, unwind, whether after school or after work. There were reasons that I needed to just calm down. And I had classic MMOs growing up, I should say, or throughout my teenage into college years, where I felt the need to have a break. It was such a level of immersion that I have missed for so long. And that's why I've enjoyed Lord of the Rings Online now, is that I have, you know, my crazy life. I got kids, I have my YouTube channel, I have my job, I have like there's so many different things going on in my day-to-day that sometimes it's nice to just have that break. And honestly, breaking away from this and being so sucked into this universe and just you know, figuring out what I'm going to do next, going here and there, I can't stress how important that is and why that Lord of the Rings Online captures that essence so damn perfectly. And then if you've ever had any interest in the Lord of the Rings story, whether it be the books or the movies, I'm purposely leaving out the TV show, and if you know, you know. Get out of here with that nonsense. Orcs? Really? Families? If you know, you know.
Daddy, chill.
Lord of the Rings Online does something really cool because it brings you into the story, the main Lord of the Rings story, and it doesn't necessarily bend it so that you are the primary mover of the main actions. You run along parallel, you play almost in a supporting role to these events that are happening around you, but you don't necessarily change the narrative to make you the hero. You are assisting the various characters, the main story, Frodo, Aragorn, Garrett, and Gandalf, those guys, you were playing alongside with them and helping them out on the way, which I honestly think is such a good feature, that is such a good way to continue on with the story without interrupting the greatness of the Lord of the Rings story. And then, of course, I have to also reiterate that the legendary servers really bring back that initial launch experience. It's like you're getting to play a brand new game right here and now. And it is just incredible. I mean, there's so many things that I've enjoyed during my time there in Middle-earth. I'm a dwarf. I'm a dwarf guardian. I'm fighting goblins and bad dwarfs. Like, it feels so good just to be able to log in. All the other responsibilities I have just completely melts away. Like, I'm able to focus on my game, have my fun, and do my thing. And I say this sincerely. You will not regret playing this game. You will not. You will have a good time. Now, of course, Lord of the Rings Online does have its flaws, and there are many people who just are immediately turned off by the game. However, I've hoped that my insight has given you a little bit of inspiration to want to play the game, because there's just so many things that it does right. Right now in 2024, it may be the very best time in its entire history to be able to come in, play a classic MMO, really capture that experience of the classic MMORPG, and really just thrive here in Middle-earth. Highly, highly recommend. 10 for 10. Now, if you have played Lord of the Rings Online and you have some experience with it, please tell me down below. I'm always interested to see what you guys have to say, what you guys are thinking. I have also documented my entire time playing here in Middle-earth, and you can see that playlist here. This is not only my initial journey, first time ever playing it, but also me playing through my more recent Dwarf Guardian. Lots of fun. Aside from that, stay caffeinated, folks.